A waitress marries a millionaire for his money.
Now all of a sudden she's got a guy that's got $10 million, and she couldn't wait to spend every dime of it.
But even money can't satisfy her appetite for danger.
This is a case of fatal attraction. It's a case of obsession.
This is the first murder case I've ever written about where I have been afraid of the killer I was writing about.
A twisted Texas tale of greed, betrayal, and murder. Tonight on Power, Privilege, and Justice.
Steve Beard was a living example of the American dream. He had sold a TV station for millions, invested his money in a shopping center, and built himself a sprawling mansion in one of Austin's fanciest communities. The 75-year-old self-made millionaire was living the high life in retirement with a beautiful young wife and loving children. But one night, in October 1999, Steve Beard awoke bleeding and in horrible pain. At 3:13 a.m., Steve called the police.
What's your emergency? 3900 Toro Canyon Road. Hurry! My captain just jumped out of my stomach.
Steve's wife, Celeste, was asleep in another room.
We're out of my stomach. Okay, sir, how did this happen? Nothing. I've been sleeping. I didn't woke up. Okay, are you there by yourself? My wife is somewhere in the house. I can't right there.
I was the first officer to arrive on the scene. I went up to the front door of the house, began knocking, banging on the door, received no response from the house at all. Walked around through a small patio area and could see a large sliding glass door, and there was a light on inside.
No noise. I mean, I didn't hear any noise. I just remember lights flashing outside, and I have no clue what's going on.
Through that sliding glass door, I could see Stephen Beard laying in bed. It looked extremely bad. I broke the door with my baton.
We get into the back room, the master bedroom where my dad was, and there's already people in there working on him.
Beard's wife, Celeste, was in the main hallway. Her cries filled the house.
Celeste was screaming things like, "Don't let him die, what's going on, you know, what happened, don't let him die."
A helicopter flew Steve to a nearby hospital. He was in critical condition.
After about a minute or two in the room, myself and another officer discovered a shotgun shell. And at that time, everything changed. I declared the house a crime scene.
One of the police officers was asking me if my dad was suicidal. And I said, no. Why? Did somebody shoot him? And they said, yes, don't tell your mother.
As the police tried to solve who shot Stephen Beard, his family rushed to the hospital. One thing was clear: Beard's rags-to-riches story wasn't going to have a happy ending.
Steve Beard was born into a poor Dallas family. Always ambitious, he dreamed of becoming a doctor. Then World War II intervened and Steve joined the Navy. When he returned home, he took a job at a local department store. While working there, he met Elise Adams. Steve's job didn't pay much, but he was in love. In 1951, he and Elise married. They would raise 3 children together.
My mother grew up with my dad when he was working for $15 a week. She went through those bad years when he was cutting his teeth and paying his dues.
Steve moved the family to Austin, where he got a low-level job in advertising. Smart and hard-working, he rose fast. By 1978, he was a top executive. But Steve was even more ambitious. He co-founded Austin's first independent television station.
Steve was a very, very hard worker. When he was getting the TV station off the ground, he was also still working his job in Fort Worth with Blair Advertising. He did this for years. He was very demanding.
KBVO was a big success, and Steve became a local media mogul. But in 1993, tragedy struck. His wife of 42 years, Elise, died of cancer. Steve decided to sell the station for $54 million. He was now a very rich and very single man.
We went on a trip to Europe, and some of the single women were just like vultures circling around a dead cow in the desert, you know. And he said, God, he said, I just wish I could just have some peace.
Steve began spending more time at the very exclusive Austin Country Club. There, a 32-year-old waitress, Celeste Martinez, caught his eye.
He says he hired a housekeeper, and that was Celeste. And then the next thing we know, his companion for the Super Bowl trip was his housekeeper. And I went, oh boy. I said, obviously she's not a housekeeper anymore.
My gosh, you have this attractive young 30-something girl coming after you? He's living in a huge house by himself. He's terribly lonely. He's retired. And now he has this beautiful young companion to travel with him, to enjoy good food and wine. Why not?
But Steve's new traveling companion brought along a lot of baggage. She'd been divorced 3 times and had a history of using drugs. Moving from town to town, Celeste had put her twin daughters into foster care many times. Now, she was ready to settle down with a man, a rich man.
My dad was his own man, and he was going to do what he wanted to do. He had always been in that director's role. I could have jumped off the University of Texas Tower with a banner that said, don't do it, and it wouldn't have made any difference.
On February 18, 1995, Steve Beard married Celeste Martinez. She was 32. He was 70. Under terms of their prenuptial agreement, Steve gave Celeste a cash gift of $500,000. She'd receive an additional $500,000 if they stayed married for 3 years. Celeste immediately went on a shopping spree, spending her $500,000 in 6 months.
I need money for my hair and my nails and my rent that I spent.
Steve also adopted Celeste's twin daughters. The girls, Jennifer and Christina, moved to a new neighborhood in the hills and to a new high school. They bought new clothes and made new friends. For the first time, they were living with their mother in a stable home.
We rarely lived with her at a young age. Christina and I lived in foster home for a good chunk of time. Thank God for Steve, and I considered him my second natural father.
He was loyal. He loved to hug you. He had a great sense of humor, really good wit, very generous, the perfect host.
Celeste probably thought she had won the lottery. A beautiful house, the country club, plenty of spending money. For some women, that would have been enough. Not Celeste.
After 3 years of marriage, Celeste's wild side reemerges. She begins leading a secret life, partying with many different men, including her ex-husband, Jimmy Martinez. Together, they host an 18th birthday party for her twin daughters. Steve is not even invited.
She knew how to throw a party. Like for the girls' 18th birthday party, for example, it cost close to $10,000, with the male strippers, an open bar.
She was wild and loved to party and unpredictable.
We'd never met an adult who was so open.
She would talk about how Steve was very old and he could not satisfy her sexually, and she would express how Jimmy did that very well.
Celeste is an inappropriate person. 100% everything she does is inappropriate. The way she raised Jen and I was inappropriate.
And the names she called Steve were just abominable. Big Daddy Warbucks, fat ass, and that's what he was to her. But he loved her so much, he put up with all of her crap.
Soon, Celeste began to spike Steve's drinks with Everclear, powerful grain alcohol. She also put sleeping pills in his food so she could go out at night and party.
It was very difficult to see what Celeste was doing to him. I just wish I would have stood up a lot sooner.
Finally, after learning that Celeste had run up $300,000 in entertainment and shopping expenses, Steve kicked her out of his house and threatened to divorce her.
He'd already given her everything he'd promised, so she would get zero when they divorced. Yeah, they'd have to sell the houses, she'd get that. But she wanted to be a multi-millionaire, not a millionaire.
Celeste sees her chance at a fortune going up in smoke, and she isn't going to let that happen. She writes Steve a letter using all her charm.
When you called this morning asking if we should just get divorced, it completely took me by surprise. I value everything that you have done for all of us. I love you with all of my heart.
The letter doesn't work. As Steve makes preparations for divorce, Celeste raises the stakes. She threatens to kill herself, holding a gun to her head in front of her daughter Christina, but the gun is not loaded.
I mean, oh gee, I get in trouble, oh gee, I'm going to slit my wrist, oh gee, I'm going to put a gun to my head, but ooh, I don't know how to load the gun. Give me a break. You know, but yet this would work on Steve.
The people of that generation are still of the one-wife type thing, not the throwaway marriage concept. And I think that might have had some bearing on him.
In the early spring of 1999, Steve checks Celeste into a psychiatric hospital. Timberlawn is exclusive. At $1,200 a day, only the very rich can afford it. Within a few days of arriving, Celeste meets a woman who will change her life forever, Tracy Tarleton.
Tracy Tarleton is bipolar and has been in and out of psychiatric wards for years. Tracy was severely abused by her mother, grew up in basically sort of an alcoholic, dysfunctional, very successful society Texas family.
Tracy had gone to the University of Texas and managed a bookstore in Austin. Tracy and Celeste seem to have little in common, but Tracy is immediately taken with Celeste.
Tracy has been desperately seeking love probably since she was about 10 years old. And she finally found someone she thought loved her.
A bond begins to grow between the two troubled women. After a month at Timberlawn, they're released but go on seeing each other. Celeste returns to the Beard Mansion in Toro Canyon. At first, Steve accepts Tracy as his wife's new companion. But it's obvious to the twins and their friends that Tracy and Celeste are having an affair.
We knew that they were more than friends. But you've got to remember that Celeste was having affairs with lots of people. I mean, every couple of weeks it'd be someone new.
It was obvious when they were together by the way they would touch each other and smile that it wasn't purely platonic.
The two women spend every day together. Tracy's obsession with Celeste seems to be growing.
We can see Tracy's behavior changing for Celeste just in the way she dressed. Wearing the pink shirts, getting manicures, getting her hair colored. Tracy has always been a little tomboy. Always.
The atmosphere at Toro Canyon is turning poisonous. To strengthen the bond between them, Celeste tells Tracy that Steve is abusing her. Meanwhile, Steve is increasingly concerned about the relationship and tries to discourage it, but Celeste ignores him. When the twins graduate high school, Celeste invites Tracy to the ceremony. Later that night, there's a graduation party at Jimmy Martinez's house. Once again, Steve is not invited. Tracy gets drunk, and Jimmy and Celeste have to send her home when she starts getting too friendly with Celeste.
The story of Celeste, Tracy, and Steve was a train wreck waiting to happen. It seemed that everyone was, as they say, in denial. It was just a matter of time.
5 weeks later, that time arrives. Hoping to separate the two women, Steve has decided to take Celeste away on a European vacation. He, Celeste, and Christina are home packing. Jennifer is out with her friends.
Celeste seemed especially odd that night. Every few minutes she would call us. Christopher and Jen and I were all discussing it, and we knew something wasn't right that night and that something was going to happen. We didn't know what it was.
At 3 o'clock in the morning, an intruder enters through the garden of 3900 Toro Canyon Road and continues past the pool area and toward the house. The intruder crosses the patio, opens the sliding glass door, and enters Steve's bedroom. Then, the intruder points a shotgun at Steve and fires.
What's your emergency? 3900 Toro Canyon Road. Hurry. My captain just jumped out of my stomach. Out of here. We're out. Yeah, we're out of my stomach.
Steve Beard is rushed to the hospital. Christina stays behind to break the news to her sister.
That was a tough phone call. I can remember Jen just immediately started crying. And there was lots of panic, lots of confusion, because we didn't have the whole story.
Well, there was a good 20 minutes that all I knew was Steve was taken to the hospital and there was a lot of blood.
The intruder is long gone. Whoever has shot Steve Beard has made a mistake, as the police will soon discover a crucial piece of evidence has been left behind. After a life of hard work that had finally paid off in his golden years, Texas TV tycoon Steve Beard lay in the hospital. He had been shot in the stomach with a shotgun. At the hospital, Celeste and her children are tested for gunpowder on their hands and questioned by detectives.
The policeman just asked us, do you know anybody who had anything against Steve? Maybe a business partner, just someone who didn't like Steve. And we all knew, and I just said, Tracy Tarleton.
She was, I believe, obsessed with Celeste. You could tell. She wanted Steve gone.
During conversations with several of the individuals at the hospital, the name of Tracy Tarleton had come out. But they didn't want Miss Beard to know that they had told.
This is the new edition.
While the family works on helping Steve recover, the police have Celeste's lover, Tracy Tarleton, in their sights. They go to Tracy's house to question her.
Miss Tarleton was asked if she owned a shotgun. She said yes. I asked if I could see it. She thought for a few minutes and she said, okay, you can see it. She gave us a Franchi 20-gauge shotgun. It had her name inscribed on the weapon itself. I interviewed her for probably an hour. According to her, she and Celeste had had a lesbian affair.
The police test Tracy's skeet shooting gun and match it to the shotgun shell found at the crime scene. 6 days later, Tracy Tarleton is arrested for trying to kill Steve Beard. The story makes front-page headlines in Austin.
You'd think Celeste would have been distraught. The police arrest her friend for trying to murder her husband. Her husband is lying in the hospital with a giant hole in his stomach. So what does she do? She shops.
She went out and bought an $80-something thousand piece of jewelry. She would check to see if her $10,000 monthly allowance was in the bank account, and if it was, boom, she was over to Lake Charles, Louisiana to gamble.
Despite everything, Steve claims to still love his wife. He changes his will to give her an even bigger share. But this will be his final gift to Celeste. After 4 months of recovery, Steve Beard's health takes a downward turn. On January 22, 2000, he dies from an infection in his lungs. At the time of his death, Steve is worth over $10 million. Celeste stands to receive assets and property amounting to a cool $6.5 million. Steve's 5 children are to divide up what remains. Steve Beard is placed next to his first wife. More disturbingly for Celeste, the bank puts a hold on her inheritance.
After Steve died, there was a crunch for money because the bank would not give her enough. I mean, obviously they were giving her a lot, 20, 30, 40 grand, but that wasn't enough.
Short on cash, Celeste comes up with a solution and puts her daughters to work.
She had clothes that she never wore. They just had the tags on them still. And they were 2, 3, 4 years old. And she made Jennifer and I load up one of the cars full of those clothes and take them back. She wanted cash, but they wouldn't give her cash. So they gave her a store credit of like 25 grand. It was incredible. It was just the most ridiculous thing that I'd ever seen in my entire life.
Talbot's wasn't the only store we did it to. We did it to Dillard's and Foley's and the Container Store. I was very embarrassed about that, but it was something that Celeste made us do, so we did it.
I just didn't think that she would make Christina do the different things that Christina had to do if she really loved her. She would just treat her not as a daughter, almost not really as a person, just as her assistant.
Called her Mommy Dearest. She never knew we called her that, though.
Celeste's money was running out, and so was her luck. She had manipulated her daughters and her late husband, but now she was about to get a taste of her own medicine.
Steve Beard is dead, and Tracy Tarleton is out on bail charged with shooting him. But the police aren't satisfied. They suspect Celeste is somehow involved in her husband's shooting. With the police on her heels and her money running out, Celeste is getting nervous. When she hears a news report that implicates her in the murder, she cracks.
There had been talk on the news that day that she had been involved in the murder, and she lost it. She asked us if we would all kill ourselves with her. And I thought, this woman is just completely nuts.
Then Celeste checked herself back into treatment. Had she finally realized how out of control she was? Apparently not.
You never know what she's going to do. You don't know if she's going to stick a blow dryer in the bathtub in front of us, or if she's going to try cutting herself with scissors, or jump out of a car, I mean, she's very scary.
After a few weeks at Timberlawn, Celeste calls Christina to come and take her home. But Christina is scared and refuses to go.
She's being very mean to me, telling me if I don't come get her, I'm going to regret it.
But Christina's sister Jennifer does agree to pick up Celeste and takes along her boyfriend, Chris Deuce. Before the night is through, the twins will see their mother's darkest side, and nothing will ever be the same.
She gets in the elevator and says, "Come on, guys, let's go." So we have her luggage and we run into the car.
Celeste then calls Christina, who is back at the house. Christina secretly records the call on her answering machine.
Christina, what are you saying by deliberately disobeying me? Huh? What don't you know? Because I'm a worse person and my father who molested me. You know what you don't know? Huh? Because I've been that cruel to you? No. Then why don't you say that I hurt you worse than my dad hurt me? Because you did. Oh my God. he's like, oh my God, just sticking a knife down my throat, bitch.
The phone conversation ended, and she was just livid. And that's when she said, I could kill Christina. And I looked in the rearview mirror because Jennifer was in the back seat, and we knew then it was time to leave.
We knew we were never going back. You know, there wasn't enough locks on the door, you know, for the two of us to feel safe after that car ride.
After Celeste's tirade and threats, Jennifer and her friends are convinced that her mother is behind Steve's death. But Christina still doesn't believe it.
She was the one that was really manipulated by her mother, and she's the one that loved her mother. I think it was a hard decision for her because she didn't really know what to believe.
I knew that I couldn't stand up to Celeste my whole entire life. I was trying to grow a backbone against her, just to be my own self, because it's just like, who is Christina without Celeste?
Can you imagine that devastation of this mom who you want to love you and take care of you and caress you and comfort you and be there at your wedding, and she's out threatening people?
There were a whole chain of events that were really scary in that time frame.
The next day, Christina gets another call from her mother, which she also records.
Why are you so frightened, Dad? You think you know me, but you don't. When you came home, I was going to tell you I hired somebody to kill her.
The phone call. That was my turning point.
We were scared to death. We thought she'd kill the girls. And maybe all four of us, we didn't know. I mean, it was very real.
This is the first murder case I've ever written about where I have been afraid of the killer I was writing about. She's vindictive. She has her husband shot, then she tries to hire someone to kill Tracy. The kids are afraid. No one is revealing where they live, their phone numbers, any contact information. There are so many people out there who are afraid of Celeste Beard and what she will do.
Now, with Christina on board, the girls and their friends go to the prosecutor with tapes, letters, and their suspicions.
I don't think she ever thought we would turn on her. And that was a large gamble on her part.
Celeste had manipulated everyone around her for a long time. But now she had her daughters and the state of Texas on her tail. Her days were numbered.
The prosecutors ratchet up the pressure on Tracy, and 2 days before her trial is to start, she strikes a deal. She agrees to testify against her former lover.
I asked someone, why did Tracy finally turn, thinking, oh, it's because she's about to go to prison and facing possibly the death penalty of life at best? And they said because she finally realized that Celeste didn't love her.
On March 28, 2002, Celeste Beard is arrested and indicted on a capital murder charge. The evidence is against her, but Celeste has two things in her favor: her ability to manipulate the people in her life and her dead husband's money. In early 2003, the eyes of Austin, Texas are on one place: the courthouse where Celeste Beard is about to go on trial for the murder of her husband, Steve.
Celeste told people that she couldn't wait for him to die, and the evidence will show that she did not wait.
Celeste's lawyer, Dick DeGuerin, is famous for his high-profile clients like Robert Durst and the Branch Davidians.
Dick DeGuerin is a homegrown Texan with a great track record and an expensive price tag. But Celeste could afford it. She had access to Steve Beard's fortune. She was spending his money to defend herself from charges that she caused his death.
This is a case of fatal attraction. It's a case of obsession.
The prosecution was claiming that Celeste had manipulated her lover, Tracy Tarleton, into the murder. But DeGuerin said that Tracy shot Steve for her own motives.
Unencouraged, undirected, uncommanded, on her own, Tracy Tarleton entered Stephen Beard's bedroom with a 20-gauge shotgun loaded with birdshot.
Bankrolled by Steve's fortune, Celeste's lawyers spend $500,000 trying to defend her. An astounding 45 expert witnesses are called to testify about everything from finance to mental health.
A bipolar disorder that was sometimes of psychotic proportions.
But the most powerful impression is made by Celeste herself, who enters the courtroom to gasps of surprise, dressed conservatively with a cast on her leg, which she never explains.
Heck, when I looked over, I thought she was one of the attorneys. When you visualize somebody that you think is going to be convicted of this type of crime, you don't necessarily visualize a middle-aged woman. It just didn't seem to fit.
She is charming. That's how she ropes everybody in. She has this sweet little lisp. She has a soft touch, very prim, with her arms under the table. But if you'll notice, as trial goes on, she's not sitting as primly every day. This woman has temper like that.
Although Celeste does not take the stand herself, the prosecutors play a taped deposition to attack her credibility.
Did you ever have any romantic involvement with Tracy Tarleton?
No, I did not.
Did you have any kind of intimate physical relationship with Tracy Tarleton?
No, I did not.
What was the reason that you had communication with Tracy Tarleton in May of 2000?
Because I had lost my entire family in less than 6 months.
Did you ask her if she shot Stephen Beard?
No.
But when Tracy Tarleton takes the stand, she has a very different story to tell.
Did there ever develop any kind of relationship between y'all that was more than just a platonic friendship?
Yes, it did. She followed me into my room one day and we ended up kissing.
Did it ever progress to orgasm?
Yes. Our relationship was, we felt like it was serious. I felt like, I loved her and I believed that she loved me. She spent a lot of time letting me know that she did.
Tracy shocks the courtroom when she testifies that Celeste tried to kill Steve many times.
He drank vodka, but she would pour out the vodka and pour in Everclear. She also would crush up sleeping pills and put them in his drinks. She said that, sooner or later, it's going to kill him. She had asked me to order a book for her called The Poisoner's Handbook because she wanted to cook up a batch of botulism and poison him with it.
We really de-emphasized Tracy's testimony. Especially the botulism really defied credibility. My thinking was, this lady is telling a whopper.
Then the prosecution goes to the heart of its case, how Celeste manipulated Tracy into murdering Steve.
What did you say about her suggestion that she shoot Steve Beard?
I said, I don't want to do this. She said, there's nothing left. I might as well just take it right now and shoot myself. And I said, fine, let's go. I'll do it. I thought about her and all of the torment and terror that I thought she'd been experiencing all these months. And so by the time I got to the bedroom, I couldn't stop and I couldn't look and I couldn't do anything but pull the trigger. And
show us how you shot him.
I walked down to the end of the bed and I saw him and I pulled up and I shot him.
Tracy's mentally ill. Tracy has a drug and alcohol problem. Tracy, again, if you go back and look at her background of the abuse, she is just a perfect target to be set up.
I started feeling a kindredness with Steve Beard. We had both been used by the same woman to get his money.
The real reason you're testifying is because you got a sweetheart deal, 20 years, of which you'll probably only have to serve 10. Isn't that right?
That's not the primary reason I'm testifying.
Despite the gravity of the charges, a circus-like atmosphere prevails, with nearly 500 exhibits, hundreds of objections, and over 100 witnesses. The trial does not, for most spectators, evoke the majesty of the law.
I didn't go in expecting to see you know, To Kill a Mockingbird or 12 Angry Men or Chicago. So when it turned out to really be a big show, I was kind of surprised.
Celeste's attorney defends her by attacking her daughters, accusing them of gold digging.
And you didn't like Steve, did you?
That's not true.
Steve didn't like you either, did he?
He did too like me.
Didn't you contact a lawyer about becoming your mom's guardian, taking over completely?
That's correct.
You're planning, if your mom gets convicted, to file another lawsuit so you can get your share of Steve's estate.
No.
You bought a Jeep.
Correct.
You had a Cadillac, and your sister had a Cadillac, but you bought a Jeep, too.
Correct. I mean, I just can't imagine how they think 19-year-old kids, I mean, we were kids at 19, could even cook up a scheme like they were trying to make us out to be. It just seemed like DeGuerin was just making up all this bogus evidence. I knew they were going to do that, but it still made me angry.
It's inaccurate, it's unfair, and let's face it, if Dick DeGuerin were being paid $500,000 by the children, he would be calling Celeste Beard evil and not the children.
Then, the prosecution plays the tape Christina made of her mother's murderous rage.
When you listen to what was on those tapes, you just get the raw, uncensored look into her soul. And I didn't like what I saw. Now, I'd like to add that we made a conscious attempt not to be trying her for being a bad person, but trying her for the crime of capital murder.
I wouldn't select her to be my friend. However, that doesn't make her guilty of murder.
Nearly all the evidence was circumstantial. The twins did stand to gain financially if Celeste were convicted, and Tracy was by no means the perfect witness. It was clear that this wasn't going to be the slam dunk prosecutors were hoping for.
When you're rich, like Celeste Beard, you can buy a lot of things. You can buy a lot of friends, you can buy a lot of lawyers, and you can buy a lot of witnesses. Folks, if you say that Celeste Beard is not guilty with all of this evidence, then you're going to tell her that her money can buy anything.
This soap opera that we went through for 4 weeks does not prove Celeste is a killer or wanted her husband dead or did anything to do it. The only evidence they have is Tracy Tarleton, and Tracy Tarleton can't be believed. She can't be believed because she has such a stake in it, but not only because of that, but because she's